Hello. So this is my presentation on climate change and its effects on Albany, New York. So the question is, what is climate change? Climate change is the study of the long-term shift in temperature and weather patterns. Effects from climate change include extreme temperatures, severe weather, rising sea levels, loss of species habitat, societal and economic damage on both regional and global scales, and much more. Climate change is caused and fueled by a number of factors. It has been observed that the planet has gone through climate fluctuations throughout the entirety of its existence naturally, but more recently, climate change is rapidly advancing with the addition of man-made greenhouse gas emissions. Carbon release from burning fossil fuels, along with methane release from businesses like farms, account for a large portion of climate change influence from man. As more of these greenhouse gases are released into the atmosphere, the warmer the planet becomes. As the globe warms and the sea levels rise, more wildfires begin, less crop production, loss of species, dramatic weather patterns arise, and much more. There are several mechanisms involved in causing and further fueling climate change. These mechanisms can trigger what are known as positive and negative feedbacks. Feedbacks are a critical set of processes that have an impactful effect on our climate system. Although feedbacks are not responsible for the introduction of an initial warming, they have the power to strengthen and fuel the original warming process. However, feedbacks also have the power to decrease a warming trend. So positive feedbacks are defined as a set of processes that strengthen and accelerates a warming shift. People usually associate the word positive with something good happening. This would be incorrect when speaking about feedback loops within the climate system. In this sense, the word positive simply means the addition of. Therefore, positive feedbacks within the climate system should be thought of as adding to the warming trend. And obviously, this means negative consequences for our planet. Negative feedbacks are defined as a set of processes that act to reduce the initial warming forcing. Again, people usually associate the word negative with something bad happening. However, in this case, that would be incorrect as well. Negative in this sense simply means the reduction or decreasing of negative warming forcings. Negative feedbacks are accredited to keeping our climate system stable. A mechanism that further causes climate change is the release of methane from the thawing of the Arctic permafrost. As methane is released from the permafrost, as it melts, methane is then added into our atmosphere where it further warms the planet. This causes more permafrost to melt and release more methane. So this is an example of a positive feedback. On the other hand, negative feedbacks are fueled by mechanisms that help control climate change. So an example of this would be rock weathering. This occurs when rocks are exposed to and have the ability to interact with both the water and atmosphere. During this process, they undergo a series of chemical and physical changes that creates a negative feedback process. In this case, the forcing agent is an abundant amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere for the rocks to interact with. The first part of this process begins with the consumption of carbonic acid being formed from water and carbon dioxide and dissolving minerals in the rocks. With an increase in carbon consumption, this means that there is less of it in the atmosphere where it could contribute to the warming trend. So throughout history, there have been several climatic events that have affected the area of Albany, New York. The first one I will be discussing is the year 1816, also known as the year without a summer. So during the year 1815, a volcano called Mount Tambora in Indonesia began to explode over a period of 4 months. This volcano explosion expelled large amounts of ash and aerosol particles into the stratosphere, where they then traveled across the globe. These particles effectively blocked out the sun and dropped the global temperature by a whole 3 degrees Celsius. North America, as well as Europe, suffered freezing temperatures and snowstorms. This affected the east coast of North America greatly. The area of New York was pummeled by snow. They even had a substantial snowstorm in the month of June, which is crazy. Crops could not survive the cold temperatures and the lack of sunlight, so the price of food as well as travel skyrocketed. During this time, a lot of Northeasterners chose to move out to the Midwest in hopes of a better climate. And then another climatic event that affected the area of Albany, New York, was what is known as the Little Ice Age. This was a period in time from around 1300 to the year 1850. This was a cooling period of time that particularly affected Europe and North America. Globally, temperatures dropped by 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Particularly for North America, colder temperatures as well as drier seasons occurred, just like the year 1816, year without a summer, which occurred within the Little Ice Age. Agricultural businesses in North America were severely impacted, including areas in New York. Scientists know that this period of time occurred by studying the proxies that exist. These proxies include ice core data, tree rings, and other paleoclimatic indicators. So, climate has fluctuated and evolved over the past 100 years in the Albany area of New York State. Besides a temperature increase, it has also been observed that there has been an increase in rainfall and snow in the winter months, but much less in the summer. It is projected that the increase in precipitation is to continue along with extreme temperatures and storm events. So pictured here is my graph depicting the annual temperature means for Albany, New York from the year 1922 to the year 2021. And as you can see, Albany's temperature has been steadily on the rise for the past 100 years and is expected to continue moving in the same direction as the planet warms. Climate change has influenced copious amounts of environmental issues around the globe. The area of Albany in particular has suffered from multiple of these. For example, with temperatures on the rise, a few types of important species of trees like paper birches and sugar maples are expected to dwindle in population as they migrate north. Eventually, New York State is expected to completely lose these two types of tree species. And then another resource impacted negatively by climate change is the dwindling trout population living within New York's freshwater rivers. Again, due to higher temperatures and drought conditions, the trout are having to suffer through low levels of dissolved oxygen, slow stream velocity, low depth of flow, high water temperature, and high levels of turbidity. Climate change has also influenced a number of socioeconomic issues throughout the state of New York. Around Albany, thousands of tourists from all over come to experience some of the best ski slopes in the country. Unfortunately, with rising temperatures, these slopes have become threatened. Skiing season in New York has been starting later and ending earlier over the past few years, and this trend is expected to continue as the planet continues to warm. It has been projected that if the warming trend continues as it is, well over half of New York's skiing areas will be shut down permanently. Not only does this mean less tourism for the area, but people will also be losing their jobs. Another socioeconomic issue influenced by climate change resides in the agricultural field. Currently, New York is the fifth largest dairy producer in the United States. However, going forward, it'll become increasingly difficult to maintain as temperatures continue to rise, and it becomes more costly to air condition dairy barns. As a result, this will increase the price of dairy products going on grocery store shelves, and the increased use of air conditioner will also continue to influence climate change as it consumes fossil fuel generated electricity. So in hopes of combating climate change, New York has taken up several routes of action. To mitigate climate change, for example, the state of New York is proposing a bill in November called the Environmental Bond Act that would allocate $700 million in spending to combating climate change. So the Bond Act mitigates several areas affected by climate change, such as transportation, air quality, energy efficiency standards, and more. For example, in terms of transportation, the Bond Act will continue programs that are already in place to tackle transportation-related pollution by supporting electric vehicles and associated infrastructure, also by investing in pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, reducing congestion, and expanding and greening public transportation. An example of geoengineering action that New York is taking to combat climate change is carbon capture. Hotels, factories, and commercial buildings throughout the state are making the decision to participate in carbon capture processes, which essentially isolate the carbon molecules from the emissions, converts them into a liquid state, and then disposes of it by burying it deep underground or by injecting it into materials like concrete. So, when speaking about the future of climate change and how exactly it will affect New York, there are many predictions and models describing what that future may look like. The total number of individual hot days within a year, as well as the yearly frequency and longevity of heat waves in New York, are projected to increase as time moves forward. And on the other hand, extremely cold days are expected to decrease in number. Some data has connected this to the loss of sea ice in the Arctic Sea as it weakens the temperature gradient that tends to confine the polar vortex. Although the prediction for future temperatures includes an increase in extreme highs and fewer extreme lows, the weakening of this temperature gradient could allow excursions of the vortex's extreme cold over the northeast, which would result in periods of extreme cold. But as time goes on, these outbreaks will become more unusual. Another prediction of climate change's effects on New York includes a decrease in overall snowfall. It is expected that there will be less frequent snowfall, as well as an earlier melting point in the years to come. One modeling study showed that under a high emissions scenario, Central and Eastern North America would experience about 28% fewer snowstorms per year on average. It also mentioned that the total amount of snow per storm would decrease by 1/3 by the 2090s. So, in conclusion, climate change is and will continue to affect all areas of the world to individual degrees if no extreme changes are made. Naturally, New York has been through several climatic events throughout history, such as the Great Tambora eruption after effects. But with such a large increase in man made greenhouse gas emissions, we are hurtling towards a tipping point. In particular, the area of Albany, New York is currently experiencing a loss of tourism and jobs, witnessing the environment suffer as certain species of wildlife struggle to thrive, and an inflation of the price of food as agricultural businesses experience extreme highs regarding the price it costs to run their operations. New York is proposing, as well as carrying out several climate mitigation and geoengineering strategies and techniques that will hopefully put a large dent in the battle to combat climate change. And then here are my references. Thank you.